Hello, it's Lexi at Cozy Tea Cafe over on Bookstagram. Today we're going to be summarizing Iron Flame. So if you're not familiar with this page, these are summary videos full of spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, don't continue watching. We're going to start with part 1. This takes place immediately after the events of Fourth Wing. So Violet wakes up still reeling from the attack in Ressin with the venom and is weak from the poison-tipped dagger she was stabbed with. She's bitter and upset with both Brennan and Xaden for keeping the fact that Brennan, her brother, was alive from her. And Darna is asleep in the sleep state after overexerting herself at the battle. Violet then attends a meeting regarding the rebellion's next steps, and some members of the Rebellion Council believe that she should be held prisoner since she's Lilith Sorrengail's daughter and can't be trusted. It's ultimately decided that she can go back to Basgiath, and she goes to Mount Tarn, and she sees that Andarna is asleep and twice the size that she previously was. By using all of her power to stop time at the battle, she drained herself and accelerated her growth. Tarn confirms to Violet that Andarna is not his offspring, even though Andarna's scales are now black instead of gold because she is now an adolescent and not a hatchling. Violet asks if she'll have a morning star tail like Tarn since she has black scales, and he says that a dragon's tail is chosen based off of necessity and not genetics. He says that adolescent dragons are dangerous because they're very impatient, especially with humans, and they have scales, teeth, claws, and fire to contend with. They fly back with Tarn carrying Andarna, and she is very sassy. When they get back to Basgiath, they immediately go to Liam's room and grab the letters that were stashed under his bed. They exit his room and see Riddick and Rhiannon. They're relieved because everyone thinks that they're dead, and Violet gives Rhiannon the letters and tells her to hide them. And she tells Xaden that he can trust her. Rhiannon realizes what these letters are and realizes that Liam's dead, and obviously she starts to cry. Xaden tells Violet that she cannot tell her friends about the rebellion and tells her that if she cannot lie to them, then she needs to distance herself from them. He then tells her that he never wanted to put her in this position in the first place, which is why he didn't tell her. Violet tells Xaden that she needs complete and total honesty from him moving on. She says she can forgive him from keeping things from her before now in order to save lives, but from here on out, she needs complete honesty from him. Xaden says that he will give her complete honesty about himself, but with leading a revolution, he can't risk telling her everything and says he will always have some sort of secret. Their War Games squad shows up as the death roll is being called out, and they announce themselves as alive, despite what the death toll reads. Lilith demands to know why their names are on the death toll if they are not dead. Colonel Atos says it's because they were presumed dead after 6 days of no contact, but now it seems that they were deserters instead. Xaden and Violet explain that when they got to their outpost for War Games, they were ambushed by griffins and lost Soleil and Liam in this battle. Violet explains that they received a note at the abandoned outpost with instructions written in Colonel Atos' handwriting. Lilith confirms that this is his handwriting and says that he has to reprimand him in her office later. Dane approaches Violet and reaches for her, and she says that if he tries to touch her, she'll cut off his hands. During their after party, Colonel Atos approaches Xaden and Violet and tells them that there will be a new vice commandant at Basgiath, Colonel Varish. He then threatens them by saying secrets die with those who keep them. Andarna enters into the dreamless sleep, and they have a new professor, Professor Grady, who is teaching Rider Survivor course, also called RSC. Parapat starts for the new first years, and Violet and Dane recognize King Tori's third son, Cam, who is now going by Auric Greycastle to keep his identity hidden. Sloane, Liam's younger sister, shows up to Parapat and recognizes Violet. She tells her to go to hell because she thinks Violet is responsible for Liam's death. She makes it through Parapat and is placed in Violet's wing and basically makes a big scene about it and says that she refuses. Rhiannon, who is now squad leader, says that she has no choice, and then Rhiannon chooses Sawyer to be the squad's executive officer. After Parapat, while all the cadets are in front of the dragons, some first years get spooked and try to flee, and the dragons basically torch them. Among the dragons that torch them is Solus, Varish's evil orange dragon, who's got some hidden beef with Tarn, apparently. Anyone in their vicinity who didn't duck is killed by fire. Professor Markham, who is Violet's old scribe mentor, is now their professor for Battle Brief. She suspects that he knows the truth about what's happening beyond the wards, since he wrote basically all of the history books on Navarre. Rhiannon says she thinks they're hiding something from them because she went to the healer's quadrant and Professor Nolan, who is a mender, looked run down and part of the healer's wing is being guarded. So during assessment day, Sloane and Auric are paired up together to fight, and Sloane says she wants to fight Violet instead. The professor says no, especially since Violet was trained by Xaden and wouldn't want to unleash her on a first year. Another first year overhears Violet Sorrengail's name and asks if any of them are her. Nadine jokes around and says, "Yeah, I'm Violet," and the first year who asked ends up stepping up to her and snapping her neck and killing her. In everyone's panic, he realizes that he didn't actually kill Violet, and then when he spots her, he charges towards her and they begin fighting. Since he's not in her squad, nobody can interfere with the challenge, those are the rules, and Violet ends up killing him. With Tairn and Sagail being mated dragons, Xaden and Violet have a deal with leadership that they travel to each other every 7 days, switching on and off. So Xaden shows up a day late, and he gives her a letter basically telling him about his life and hopes to be more open with her. He then tells her how to get to his room at his outpost and says that him and her can enter, no one else. He's worded it to only let the two of them in, basically letting her know that he's not going to be hooking up with anyone at his outpost. Imogen and Violet start running together every morning, and on one of these runs, Jacinia shows up in the courtyard waiting for Violet, which is odd because scribes usually aren't allowed in the Riders' Quadrant. Jacinia says that she has a text for her on the first 6 riders after Violet said that she was curious about them in passing. In exchange, she asks for Violet's help translating an old text and asks her not to tell anyone because it's against the rules for scribes to ask for help. While they're talking, Violet sees Professor Markham hauling out a cadet, and Jacinia appears a little bit flustered and says that it could be her fault because she recorded his requests in their records, obviously due to protocol. When Violet asks what the text was, Jacinia looks nervous and says she has to go. The cadets get mail from their families, and Violet gets a letter from her sister, but she notices various black lines, meaning that someone read her mail and redacted some of the information. In dragon combat training, Professor Varish approaches and asks where Andarna is. Since no one knows that she was a baby and is an adolescent now, Violet has to improvise and says that she doesn't usually come to practice because she can't bear a rider, so it's basically useless for her to be there. Varish says that Andarna must be at the next lesson, and Violet responds by saying, "Dragons don't take orders from humans, we know this." Varish says that while that's true, cadets do take orders. So Bodhi and Violet are talking, and Bodhi tells Violet to forgive Xaden. He says he's never seen him care about someone this much, and that's including Catriona. Violet then asks who that is, and Bodhi realizes he's probably said something that he shouldn't have, and tells her to forget it. Violet and Tairn get ready to fly to Xaden's outpost, and they're stopped by Varish, who insists on checking her bag before she leaves. He finds nothing and says that he's going to be contemplating her punishment for Andarna not showing up to their last training session. When Violet gets to Xaden's outpost, she and Xaden kiss, but they don't go any farther because Violet won't tell Xaden those 3 words that he's looking for. In other words, she won't tell him that she loves him. In Xaden's room, he has an imbued blade, and he tells Violet that it's imbued by one's own power and it's really difficult to do. He also says they need a luminary device in order to forge new weapons because luminaries amplify dragon fire in order to smelt new weapons. Back at Basgiath, Varish's punishment for Violet is using her signet basically to a near burnout. He has Professor Carr instruct her to continuously use her lightning power to strike a rock, but she doesn't have control yet, so she can't aim, and it takes forever. He demands so many strikes that she is physically and mentally exhausted on the brink of a burnout, and Professor Carr is basically pushing on Varish, telling him that she can't take another strike, but Varish insists that she keep going. After a near burnout, Tairn flies her over to a stream to cool her off. On Violet's way to class with Rhiannon, Riddick, and Sawyer, a bag is thrown over her head and she's knocked unconscious for their first RSC challenge with Professor Grady. They're given water that's laced with chemical that blocks their dragon bonds and their signets. So for this challenge, the healers, the riders, the infantry, and the scribes are all broken up into teams and given a map to follow. While they're following the map, they come across Jack Barlow's previously bonded orange dragon in a clearing, and one of their teammates tries to run and the dragon burns him alive and flies off. Rhiannon confronts Violet and says she knows that she's been hiding something from her and tells her that whenever she's ready to talk, she'll listen. Violet again asks Jesinia what book was requested that got the cadet killed, and she appears shocked when learning that he was killed, and she says that he requested an account of a border attack that did not exist 3 times. The cadet insisted that it did happen because he had family that was killed there. Violet asked Jesinia why she didn't record her request last year when she asked for the Fables of the Baron, and Jesinia says initially it was because she was embarrassed that she couldn't find it, and then it was because she realized that the archives were incomplete, which shouldn't be possible. Jesinia also said that she has not recorded any of Violet's requests from this year and knows that she's looking for something and asks what it is. Violet decides to trust her and asks her for any texts about how the first 6 developed the wards. Jesinia agrees as long as Violet lends her a copy of the Fables. During the first year's challenge matchups, Violet blows a powder into the face of Sloane's opponent, and when the powder mixes with the substance that Violet gave her earlier in the day, it leads to her opponent being disoriented and allows Sloane to win. Violet approaches Sloane after the fight and tells her what happened and says that she needs to get trained if she wants to stay alive. Xaden shows up and sees the texts in Violet's room and realizes that she's been keeping things from him, so she comes clean. He says that she's endangered herself by trusting Jesinia, and he requests that they both meet her together, presumably to check her intentions. Violet shows up for mounting lessons without Andarna again, and Varish tells her to mount Taryn and head to Professor Carr for her punishment. Taryn then says she will not be punished and he will not fly her there, and relays this command through all of the dragons. He says that dragons do not obey humans, and Varish says that Violet is being punished because she's derelict in her duties. Taryn then attacks Varish's dragon, Solus, until he says that Violet will not be punished. Taryn says that it's not enough, and Varish says that he will never command Andarna to appear ever again, and Taryn demands that he apologize to Violet on his knees, which obviously makes everyone around uncomfortable. After the fact, Rhiannon corners Violet and yells at her for not talking to her. She says that she can tell she's holding back and just wants her to open up. Violet lashes out at her and tells her that she doesn't know what it's like out there, and she'll never know because she wasn't there at War Games, and she doesn't know what's waiting for them. She says she doesn't know how it felt to watch Liam die and have to still fight afterwards. Rhiannon then feels bad and understands why Violet has closed herself off a little bit more. Violet and Taryn leave to meet Xaden at the outpost, and when she gets there, he speaks through their bond, asking her to kiss him quickly if they want time to talk alone tonight. Violet doesn't know why he's saying this, but she does, and after they kiss, she pulls apart and sees Mira behind them, and Mira says that she's now stationed there as well. So she was going to ask Violet to stay in her room, but now she sees that she wants to stay with Xaden after the kiss. Since Xaden is on duty, Violet spends the day with Mira and starts to casually ask her about the wards, since Mira's signet is expanding the wards or creating small wards of her own. She then asks about the recent attacks and asks if Mira knew anyone who died, and alludes to the fact that the reports might not be 100% correct. Mira puts a sound shield around them and asks her what's going on, saying that the questions she's asking are not normal. Violet goes out on a limb and says that the dragons she saw in the distance might have been wyvern, and says there may be a whole war going on out there that she doesn't even know about. Mira tells her she needs to stop reading so many of those fables, and says that she hasn't been the same since the battle with the griffin. While Violet is trying to sleep, Xaden comes in from duty, and Violet confesses to him that she almost told Mira the truth, and says that he's right not to trust her. Back at Bisgayath, cadets see leadership and professors running toward the flight field, and a substitute professor shows up to tell them that he's filling in while leadership flies to an attack on one of the outposts. She says that there is only one rider down so far, a recent grad named Mason. Violet recalls that out of the 10 cadets who flew to Ressin for War Games, only 6 of them remain alive now. Dane approaches Violet and she ignores him again. Rhiannon asks what's going on between them, and Violet says that they're no longer friends because he stole something from her, and says that it's complicated. Dane then challenges Violet on the mat, knowing she isn't allowed to refuse. All of the Mark Ones are scared because of Dane's mind-reading signet, so Violet has to keep her shields locked firmly in place. While Violet and Dane are sparring, he says that he told his dad what he saw in the flash of a memory he stole from her, but had no idea that they were going to be sent into a griffin attack. Violet says she doesn't believe him and will never forgive him for Liam and Soleil's death. Dane asks if Violet knows about the 107 lashes on Xaden's back, and she says yes. Dane taps out and tells Violet that her mom is the one who gave Xaden those lashes. Rhiannon confronts Violet after the spar with Dane and demands answers. She starts to piece things together and asks who was with her in the battle and starts to recount all of the people who have died since then, including the multiple attempts on both her and Imogen's life. She also knows that Dane's signet is classified and asks what he stole from her. Violet says he stole a memory and that she can't tell anyone about his signet because it's classified. Rhiannon then starts to piece more and more together and asks if she saw something that she wasn't supposed to see in the battle, and that's why they're being targeted. Violet begs her to stop asking questions and says that it would put her in danger to know the answers. Violet then asked what killed Liam's dragon and asked if it was another dragon. Violet says no, and Rhea again asks what killed his dragon. Arik interrupts them, saying that he broke his wrist and needs to go to the infirmary. Violet quickly volunteers to take him to get out of finishing the conversation, and before she goes, she turns to Rhiannon and says, "Please don't ask me that again, I don't want to have to lie to you." While Violet is taking Arik to the infirmary, she asks where his father, the king, thinks he is, and Arik says he thinks that he's on his 20th birthday tour. Arik then says he was tipped off when the guards started walking around with new daggers and metal discs, and he knew something was happening, and he had to come here. Violet is then shocked and turns to him and asks if he knows what's happening, and Arik says, "Why else would I be here?" Violet has her first dream of the Venin Sage, and the Venin is telling her that there's no escape and tells her to join him. Xaden and Violet are walking together, and Xaden says he'll show her where the drop-off is for smuggled weapons. While they're there, Varish and Grady intercept them and say they're taking Violet for interrogation training for RSC. Xaden says that she's in no state because her arm is injured and it's against the Codex. Through the bond, Xaden tells her that Varish will use this opportunity to interrogate and kill her for the humiliation Taryn put him through. Violet says that he doesn't know that for sure, and he responds by saying, "His intentions are pretty effing clear." That's important. The professors then take Violet anyway. Violet, Sawyer, Rhiannon, and Riddick are all in the interrogation room and given biscuits and water by Professor Carr. They don't drink the water because it's the same substance that blocked them from their dragons the last time. They just fake losing their bond. And for this challenge, they have to tell each other a secret and also get a secret code that the interrogators are going to have to extract out of them. The interrogators start by beating up Violet and move their way on to the next person, but nobody breaks. Varish comes in and says that the interrogation is taking too long and says that this is his area of expertise. He says he brought in someone to crack them in record time, and it's Dane. Varish says he needs to test his signet on them to get a phrase, and Violet realizes that Varish is Dane's teacher and mentor, like Professor Carr is to her. Dane refuses because Violet is clearly injured and it's against the rules. He then leaves. Varish punches Violet and dislocates her shoulder. When Violet wakes up, she's still in the room, but Nolan has mended her. Nolan says that Varish commanded him to mend her so that he can come in and torture her again until she breaks and reveals her secrets. Nolan says that this is not usually part of protocol and says that Varish badly wants to know her secrets. He asks if it's important enough to get her and her friends tortured over, and she says yes. Nolan whispers to them that they need to find a way out. When he leaves, he closes the door but leaves the window open, and they overhear Nolan telling Varish that Violet needs to sleep off the mending for about an hour and that he has to tend to his other patient. He asks Varish to come with him. Using their signets, one of them melts the lock, and they get out and face another door. Violet feels like a tingling magic and realizes that her dagger and the lock are both glowing, and then it unlocks, which should be impossible because magic is not tied to objects. They escape, and Grady approaches them and congratulates them on their success. In Battle Brief, there are pamphlets stating that there was an attack on Zolia, a Paromish outpost, with reports of blue dragon fire stating that all Paromish civilians perished. It was printed within Basgiath and clearly done without permission, which would get someone killed if they were caught. Professor Markham says that these pamphlets were propaganda to be used in today's lesson, but clearly the class isn't ready for them and asks for them to be turned in. Violet tells the rest of her friends that if these were real, Markham would deflect, distract, and then change topics, which is exactly what he does. Violet sees Professor De Vera pocket her pamphlet, which is interesting. Markham says that they've never flown a riot of only blue dragons, and Violet knows that he's spinning the story because the pamphlet said blue dragon fire, not blue dragons. Markham then deflects and says he wants to show the class a surprise that Nolan has been working on all year. He says that Nolan's done what no mender has ever done before, and says that he saved someone after being crushed under a mountain, mending bone after bone, and Jack Barlow emerges. Markham then pivots and says that they had an unprovoked attack on an outpost from 3 griffin drifts. De Vera says that it was Samara, Xaden and Mira's outpost, and that no one was killed in the attack, but one was severely injured. As she says this, she touches the side of her neck where Xaden's relic is, and Violet starts to panic. Violet runs out of class, and the professors are calling after her, telling her that she doesn't have leave, but Taryn tells her to meet him outside because he's just as worried about Sigale. Bodhi approaches and gives Violet his jacket so she doesn't freeze on the flight. When she gets there, she sees Mira unharmed and then races to where Xaden is. She sees him sparring with Garrick, and he doesn't look injured. He sees her and runs over and says that Taryn's emotions must have taken over, causing her to, act irrationally. To overcome Taryn's emotions, he takes her into the showers and puts cold water on her. He says that he was severely injured but was mended. Violet is getting down on herself, saying that she acted recklessly and should have shut Taryn out, but Xaden says he would have reacted just as recklessly for her. They kiss and have their typical conversation or argument about him not sleeping with her until she tells him that she loves him. She says she won't be the first one to express her emotions this time after being hurt, and he says that he won't tell her he loves her just to get her to sleep with him. She said she needs him, and those are the only 3 words she's willing to give him, and they do end up sleeping together. Xaden and Violet are going to meet up with a drift to pass off supplies, and when they get there, Violet sees Serena, a drift rider that was at Resin. She also sees another female drift rider who is staring at her with malice and realizes that it's Kat, Xaden's ex. Xaden asks if she wants to talk about Kat, and Violet basically says that him and her were over before he ever met Violet, so she doesn't need answers because she has exes too. Violet lands back in Basgiath and is ready to present herself for punishment for going without leave, but Varish intercepts her and searches her bag. She sees Bodhi's jacket in the bag and Xaden's jacket that she's wearing, and basically Varish accuses her of impersonating an officer and tells her to strip. Luckily, Professor Kaori comes by and says that Violet is clearly not impersonating an officer since she's wearing her name tag and patches, and says that the rules don't apply for wearing an officer's jacket. Varys then says she'll still need to be punished for going to Samara without leave, and Professor Kaori says that he must not have talked to Officer Panchak because he gave his professional opinion this morning that Violet should not be punished for acting on behalf of her dragon. Being unable to block out a dragon is something that most senior officers struggle with. Since all of this is happening outside of Violet's room, Rhiannon is watching all of this go down through the crack in her door. Violet looks at the blade hidden at her shoulder and then gives Rhiannon a nod, kind of letting her know that she would get in trouble if she was caught. After the professors walk away, Rhiannon pulls Violet into her room and reveals that she used her summoning signet to get the blade. She demands answers, and Violet tells her and the rest of the squad that are also in Rhiannon's room that the blade is for killing Venin, and tells them what really happened at Resin. Everyone agrees to help and says that they will look for a way to create new wards. Threshing happens and both Sloane and Arik bond dragons. After threshing, the squad tells Jesinia that they think there's a hidden vault in the archives because Sawyer saw something in Lilith Sorrengail's office last year during War Games. Jesinia tells them that she thinks she found it, and the squad sends Riddick down there to talk to her while Violet goes up to the top of the education building to relieve Aya from guard duty. When she gets there, 4 infantry guards emerge to assassinate them. Violet kills one guard while another kills Aya. Violet says, "Let me guess, secrets die with those who keep them," and the remaining guards look a little stunned that she knew that. Taryn is on his way, and while Violet is fighting with one of the soldiers, he pushes her off the roof and she's dangling there, and he's trying to loosen her grip to get her to fall off the building. He's then stabbed through the neck by Jack Barlow, and Jack grabs her and heaves her up to safety. Jack says that he didn't know it was her when he heard the screams, but says Death gave him another chance and that he's changed. Aya is now dead in the scuffle, which means half of them who were in Resson are now dead. Riddick rushes to the roof and asks Violet what happened. She tells him, and then he says that Jesinia did find the vault, but it's a dead end because they need someone who's in King Tori's bloodline to open it. Violet says that she knows someone. Cough, cough. Cam/Arik. Violet tells Xaden that she told Rhiannon, Sawyer, and Riddick about the venom, and also that Imogen told her girlfriend, Quinn, when she found out that Violet told. He's not angry, but he says he's coming to the vault to help with their plan because it's very dangerous. Arik agrees to help with the plan, but he's not happy that Xaden is there because he hates Xaden for killing his brother. Luckily, Arik agrees to continue because he hates his father more than he hates Xaden. Jesinia says she can only let 4 of them in without looking suspicious. Xaden says it will be him, Violet, Arik, and Imogen because no one will see him with his shadows, and Imogen's classified signet is wiping short-term memory, which could come in handy. They're in the vault and have 1 hour before they're sealed in and killed by magic. They can't find what they're looking for, and they're running out of time. They finally find the books, and when Arik reaches in, the magic burns his hands and gives him blisters. But they get the journals and make it through the vault entrance in the nick of time. Sawyer takes Arik to his room to hide his hands overnight. They debrief with Quinn, and she says that she used her signet to project into the common areas as Violet and Rhiannon, so they'd be spotted and have an alibi in case they were ever caught. She says that her signet is stronger because her dragon was her great-aunt's dragon. She says that since she's not a direct descendant of her great-aunt, she doesn't have to worry about going mad like those whose dragons bond in direct familial lines, which is important for later. Xaden takes off with one of the journals to get it to Brennan, and Violet has the other journal. She's approached by Nolan to chat, and he offers her a lemonade. She doesn't think anything of it, but then realizes it has the chemical that stops her dragon bond and her signet. She wakes up in an interrogation chamber that is not for educational purposes with both Nolan and Varish. When they took her, they found Lyra's journal in her satchel and were alerted that the royal ward had been breached, but they didn't know who did it or what had been taken besides what they found in Violet's bag. They have a truth-sayer in the room, so Violet can only respond with truths. Varys starts beating her and torturing her. Violet wakes up and sees Liam, which is a hallucination, basically to get her through the pain. Varys says his classified signet is seeing another person's weakness. He says he wasn't able to see hers when she was shielded, but now he sees that it's her friends and family. He reveals that he's actually setting a trap for Xaden, knowing that he'll take an unauthorized leave to come and see her when she doesn't show up for their weekly meeting, and Nolan is mending her between tortures. Varish brings Dane in and says that she's trying to take down the wards for another rebellion, and he needs to see into her mind for answers. Violet tries to explain herself, but he doesn't believe her. A soldier comes in and says that all leadership are needed at the border because of another attack. Varish says that Xaden abandoned his post days ago and says all of the marked ones are being rounded up. Dane enters her mind, and Violet shoves memories of the venom and the wyvern at him, and also memories of the battle and Liam's death. Dane says, "You're smuggling weapons to aid another kingdom," and he asks Varish to see the dagger he's holding to see if it's the same one from Violet's memory. He tells Violet that she should have trusted him, and then turns and stabs Varish and cuts Violet's restraints to flee. They escape and leave the room, and Dane threatens the guards just as Xaden shows up and kills the guard. Xaden and the other cadets move to attack Dane, but Violet tells him that he saved her and helped her. Varish is still alive but coughing up blood. Dane raises a sword to finish him off, but Xaden says no, he's Violet's. Violet, with the help of Xaden, stab him through the heart and make sure that he's dead. Xaden finally says that he loves her, and she says it back. Xaden says her squad was put in the interrogation room when they tried to launch a rescue mission yesterday. Garrett calls out from the top of the steps that they have a problem, and when they round the corner, General Sorrengail has her blade to his throat. She drops him when she sees Violet and hands her the vial of antidote for the bond-blocking chemical. She says she would have come sooner if she knew, and says she promises that she didn't know. The general says she wants a moment alone with Violet to say goodbye, since all of the leadership is fleeing to contain the problem that Bodhi and Xaden created by dropping dead wyvern bodies on every outpost. Lilith tells Violet that she was supposed to be Markham's protege in the Scribe Quadrant, but Lilith knew that Violet wouldn't be so easy to control. She knew that Violet would find out the truth at some point and would unravel the carefully curated lies and would be killed for it, so that's why she forced her into the Writer's Quadrant instead. She reveals that Xaden asked for the marked ones to be allowed into the quadrant and agreed to a later debt. Violet was that debt, basically to protect her after Parapet. Lilith confirms that the knife marks on his back are from her, and Lilith tells Xaden that Markham is still with the king. Violet says that before they leave, they need to call a formation and give every cadet the choice in leaving with them. She says the dragons can vouch for who will be leaving for the right reasons. Taryn says that Andarna is still in the dreamless sleep and that no dragon has ever slept this long before. Bodhi's signet is the ability to counter signets, so he stops Carr from trying to torch them with his fire. Professor DeVera says she won't stop them. She says that she's joining them and reveals that she's the one who leaked that pamphlet in Battle Brief. A riot of 200 dragons and 101 riders leave to fight for the cause and head for Arisha. So that concludes part 1, and then we move on to part 2. And the sage shows up in Violet's dream again, saying he knows she's away from the wards. She wakes up in Xaden's bed, and they hook up. They leave the room and find Rhiannon. She says none of the cadets know what to do. They're all just in Arisha, and they don't have any guidance at this point. They go to the assembly hall, and the council is pissed that they brought all of these cadets here and says that they jeopardized the rebellion and their security. One of the council members says that Dane is isolated until his loyalty can be ascertained and wants to do the same for Violet. Xaden shows a scar on his chest, saying that he vouches for Violet and she's under his protection. He says that they have 4 professors with them willing to teach cadets, as well as the Tirish council members who will help as well. Andarna finally wakes up, and Violet sees that she's napping again, but sees her scales have almost a green sheen to them, and upon another glance, they just appear shiny and black. She's also much bigger, 2/3 the size of Sigale now, but she can't fully extend her left wing. Taryn tells Violet to shut Andarna out so we can tell her what happened. Due to the massive expenditure of energy at Ressin, Andarna was forced into a rapid growth, but since she wasn't at the hatching grounds, she wasn't able to enter the dreamless sleep right away. She also woke several times on the way back to Basgiath, and her growth was stunted and a second muscle along her wing never grew in properly. She will be able to fly eventually, but she'll never bear a rider. While trying to translate Warwick's journal, Violet keeps getting tripped up on a particular phrase that is mentioned multiple times: Iron Rain. The rest of the cadets are trying to reshape their formations, keeping squads together and reassigning section and wing leaders when needed. Professors are taking up their previous positions, and council members are taking over for professors who didn't join them when they fled. Battle Brief is now run by Brennan and Devara. Taryn tells Violet that a riot of dragons is approaching, and everyone is told to get to the Great Hall. Mira's dragon, Tyne, is at the front of the riot when she lands. She says she came to join the rebellion and brought other riders and dragons with her. She says that their mom came to the outpost and gave everyone an hour to decide if they wanted to stay or leave after telling them the truth. Mira says that the general went to all of the other outposts and did the same. Over half of the riders at her outpost chose to leave with her. Brennan then says Mira behind Violet and punches him in the face. Violet says she knows how to raise the wards, 6 of the most powerful riders in residence, with the blood of the 6 and the 1 combined to set the stone ablaze in an iron rain. She gets her, Mira, Brennan, Bodhi, Xaden, and Suri to bleed on the ward stone, but it doesn't work. Felix starts training Violet on how to aim and control her signet. He tasks her with imbuing the alloyed daggers with power so she can begin to understand how she can control her power. Violet, Mira, and Brennan head to Corden to get the luminary from Viscount Takaris against Xaden's blessing and without him knowing. When they get there, Xaden is already there and he's pissed. Violet can tell that Xaden is acquainted with this place, but realizes why when Catriona, his ex, steps beside the Viscount, who is apparently her uncle. Kat has the ability to heighten the emotions of those around her, and Violet begins feeling extremely jealous. Takaris says he'll discuss handing over the luminary when he sees Violet wield lightning in his arena, without Xaden there to help her aim. She's tasked with hitting Xaden's father's chest with lightning, but when she gets down there with Mira, a guard opens the chest and a venom is inside. Mira shields her, Violet, and Brennan with a ward using her signet, but she overexerts herself and passes out. Violet tells Brennan to take her to the steps while Taryn flies to them. Violet throws the daggers at the venom while Taryn lifts her in the air. She unleashes her lightning and kills the venom. Xaden almost strangles and kills Takaris, but when Violet shows that she's okay, they stay to negotiate, trying to get the luminary. Takaris offers private sanctuary in the Isles to Xaden and Violet if she acts as his personal guard for 2 years, but she declines. Takaris says he'll give them the luminary in exchange for weapons and a place for the Griffin Riders to stay and train. They accept this, but the only way into Orisha for Griffins is a perilous 12-hour ascent that is basically meant to deter Griffins. Each Griffin and Rider is matched with a Dragon Rider, and they make the hike together. This acts as a sort of parapet for the Griffin Riders, so the Dragon Riders can fully accept them as equals if they make it. During the ascent, they ask the Griffin Riders how they're chosen, and they say that a rider walks to the edge of a cliff and jumps off when the Griffins fly by. Whoever lands on a Griffin is chosen and bonded by that Griffin, and whoever doesn't falls into the water and swims to shore. They reach a pass that's difficult to cross, and they lose a Griffin Rider as she falls. Griffins die when their riders do, so the fallen Griffin begins to die, and Riddick gets shot by 2 arrows, and Dane is grazed by one. Brennan flies in to mend him, but then a wyvern's jaw snaps around the dying Griffin's neck. Violet has a rider with a wind signet move the clouds away from the riders, and she uses lightning to strike the riderless wyvern dead. Violet says that Venin most likely already know where they are and what they're doing because their wyverns share a consciousness with the Venin that create them. During a lesson, Professor Trissa tells the group that runes hold strands of power woven from their magic to be used for specific uses. Wielders can temper runes to be used now or later. Professor Trissa says runes were banned after the unification of Navarre, along with many other Tirish customs and traditions. The professor announces that each drift of griffins will merge with a squad of riders, and everyone will have a chance to challenge another rider on the map before that happens. Kat obviously challenges Violet, and as they're fighting, Violet realizes Xaden also taught Kat how to fight based on their similar moves. Kat uses her mind work to amp up Violet's emotions and tells her she and Xaden were engaged as an alliance and the throne was supposed to be hers. Using these mind games are also against the rules, I should add. Violet chokes her and almost kills her before Xaden enters her mind and tells her she'll regret it if she does it. She asks him to pull her back, but Kat doesn't stop heightening Violet's emotions and she loses control, causing a lightning strike to come dangerously close to them. Xaden tells leadership that Kat used mind control during their fight, which isn't allowed, and they send her off to her room to put distance between them. Xaden and Violet hook up on the throne, and he pushes his thoughts into her mind, which is the first time that he's ever done this, basically reassuring her that she doesn't need to worry about Kat. Violet's squad absorbs Kat's drift because they're the 2 strongest. Violet asks Dane for help translating Warwick's journal, and he says it's Iron Flame, not Iron Rain, but it still doesn't help. They reform a tentative friendship or truce, and he starts imbuing Orisha's wardstone with power, but says it could take days up to weeks to imbue a stone this big. Another city is then taken by Venin. This one is closer to Orisha. Dane and Violet continue translating the journal, and it says once the blood of the 6 is used on the stone, it cannot be used on another stone. Violet realizes they also translated blood wrong, and it's actually breath. So the journal says the breath of life and set ablaze in an iron flame. She realizes that they're talking about 6 dragons, not humans. Violet has another dream of the sage, and he tells her that most turn for power, but she'll turn for love, and she'll rip down the wards herself in doing so. Violet again notices a green shimmer to Indarna's scales, but she doesn't think anything of it. Someone asks Violet if she'll have 2 signets since she has 2 dragons, and she says she doesn't know. They start talking about how riders who bond the same dragon as someone in their direct familial line will also get 2 signets, but will often make them go mad, and Violet starts panicking. Spoiler alert, Xaden's bonded to his grandfather's dragon. Violet realizes how to put the wards up, but tells the Griffin riders that their powers will be nullified once they're up. She gives the riders the information before she tells Xaden because she wants them to be able to make a choice. Violet and Kat's squad goes on an educational RSC-type challenge per their professor's instruction, and during their mission in the cave, Indarna senses another dragon. They come face to face with Solus, Varish's old bonded dragon, and Andarna attacks him and then covers the group while Solus breathes fire at them. Violet tells the others to run, and Taryn is incoming to help, but he's too big to get through the entrance. Violet ends up saving Kat's life, and during the attack, Sloane's signet manifests, and she's a siphon, having the ability to take power from others. Andarna kills Solus with her poison barbed tail, and a little bit later, the Empyrean meets and finds her not guilty for killing another dragon to protect her human. After the attack, Xaden and Violet argue. He yells at her for risking herself to save Kat. He tells her to ask him questions and not be so scared about the answers. She then asks what his second signet is, and he's visibly shocked, but doesn't have the chance to answer because someone interrupts them and says a wyvern horde is incoming. They quickly get the wards up using dragon fire on the imbued stone, and Xaden and Violet fly to an isolated area to look out for the incoming wyvern. He says that when she finds out his signet, she won't love him anymore, and she tries to guess. He pleads with her to let it go and says if anyone found out that he'd be dead. She then realizes he's an intrinsic, and he says that he's a type of one, only able to read intentions, not read minds. But he says he stopped reading hers once he realized what they'd become to each other. Violet shuts him out through their bond, but knows she can't stay away from him and doesn't want to walk away from their relationship. She knows that he never used his signet maliciously on her like Dane did, and Taryn also didn't know, so he feels betrayed by Sigale at this point. The wyvern and venom horde shows up, and when the wyvern pass through the wards, they drop dead, causing the rest to flee. When they get back, the Griffin riders can still wield, so they know something's wrong with the wards, but they don't know what. A message from Commander Melgren arrives and asks the leader of their group and no more than 2 marked ones to meet them. Xaden, Ulysses, Violet, Mira, and others arrive to meet Melgren, Lilith, and others. Melgren says he let all the riders leave that day because he knew they'd need them for a coming battle. He says he saw an outcome at Samara in which they lose to the Venom, but no marked ones were there, so he wants their help to turn the outcome in their favor. He says if they help them, King Tori will agree to recognize them as an independent territory and won't wage a border war with them. Brennan shows up and Lilith is shocked. Brennan says he denies their offer of peace and accepts war because it sounds like they won't make it 2 weeks anyway. Lilith approaches her kids and says that she wants her kids to live. She says whatever wards they constructed will fail and to check the bodies of the wyvern who crossed if they don't believe her. She tells them to fix their wards and gives them Lyra's journal that was confiscated at Bezgaeth. She says if they don't fix them, they'll eventually dull to nothing. She says that their father once told her that Warwick never wanted anyone to hold the power of their own wards, but Lyra wanted the information shared. They get back and check the carcass of the wyvern that crossed into their wards, and the stone that's within the wyvern is still humming with runes, and the wyvern comes back to life. Violet kills it with lightning, but they know they have a problem, obviously. While in battle brief, Violet realizes that the Venom are only using Samara as a distraction. They're really targeting Bezgaeth, and Melgren couldn't see this outcome because the marked ones must arrive to battle. Violet flees with her squad and tells Xaden. They gather everyone willing to ride with the exception of first years and head to Bezgaeth against the council's orders. They arrive and find that Lilith and only a handful of professors have stayed back. Everyone else is at Samara. Violet tells her mom that they're actually targeting Bezgaeth and someone will attack the wards. They go down to where the wards are and the guards are dead and the wardstone is aflame with black fire and Bade, Jack's orange dragon, is down there, eyes looking glassy, with Jack Barlow on its back. The wards fall and Jack kills his own dragon and reveals he's a Venom and Nolan has been trying to heal him all year with no success. Now that the wards are down, the battle starts and Rhiannon and a Venom are in combat when Violet saves her. A wyvern chomps down on Sawyer's leg and he loses his leg below the knee. Violet jumps off Taryn to save him and she hurls him back onto Taryn to get him to safety. Kat and Violet face off against a Venom and Violet kills one with lightning, but another one comes in and is about to drain the ground that they're standing on. Andarna, camouflaged into the side of a mountain, comes out and attacks him with her first ever fire. Jesinia rides in with Sloane and Arik and finds Violet to tell her that she found the difference between the journals, but it doesn't make any sense. Lyra's journal says the breath of life of the 7 combined to set the stone ablaze in an iron flame, but there are only 6 types of dragons, not 7. Violet remembers that there are 7 runes on the ward stone, so then she begins thinking. The sage shows up and Violet tells her mom that they need to get the wards up now, and she thinks she knows how. Violet tells Xaden that if they raise the wards here, they won't be able to raise them at Orisha. They only have the resources to raise them in one place. Xaden says he wants them raised here at Basgiath to save them all because there's no home without Violet. Violet approaches Coda, the leader of Andarna's den, and asks if he's been keeping a secret, and he says yes. She also asks if he'll power the wards as the Black Dragon, since Taryn already did at Orisha, and Coda agrees. Violet then approaches Andarna and asks why she didn't tell her. She says she noticed her scales changing colors but didn't think anything of it because she's never seen an adolescent. Violet put the pieces together when she remembered that Andarna said that she was the head of her own den and that's why she was allowed to bond last year as a juvenile. Her scales aren't black, but she says she so badly wanted to be like him, meaning Taryn, so she makes them look black. Only the elders know her secret. She said she waited 650 years to hatch, waited until Violet's 18th summer when she heard of the general's weak daughter who would be the head of the scribes. Andarna knew that she'd have the head of a scribe and the heart of a rider, and she would be hers. Andarna is a 7th breed of dragon, and she agrees to breathe fire on the stone. Brennan has the stone mended, but it needs to be imbued. Violet continues to try and imbue the stone, but she's burning out. Lilith, Auric, and Brennan are in the chamber too and see that she's about to burn out, so Lilith pushes her off the stone and commands Sloane to use her as a siphon to drain her to imbue the stone. Violet begs her not to, and Sloane refuses. But when Violet opens her mind and asks for Xaden's help, she realizes that he's dying and blurts it out. Sloane hears that Xaden's dying, and then she agrees to use Lilith's power to imbue the stone until she's drained completely and Lilith ends up dying. The dragons then come and light the stone in an iron flame, and then the wards are up. When the wards are up, the wyvern bodies start to fall, and Violet rushes for Xaden since he shut her out of his mind completely and she doesn't know basically what happened to him. He has his back to her and says he killed the sage. He asks her to stay at Basgiath where it's safer. Violet says that she just fought a whole Venin army and lost her mom in the process, and says, what's scarier than that? He turns to her with red-ringed eyes and says, I am. We then get Xaden's point of view of his battle with the Venin Sage, and he's very close to burnout. The Sage says he's a general and tells Xaden that he will turn for love. Xaden reaches through the bond and realizes that Violet is going to sacrifice herself to imbue the stone. Xaden reaches into the depths of Sigale's power to hold and contain the Sage with his shadows, but he's too strong. Xaden then reaches out for the ground and reaches into the power of the earth and is able to kill the sage, but in doing so becomes Venin. He wakes up later and is in bed with Violet, but he gets out and heads to Jack Barlow's cell and asks him for the cure. Jack says there is no cure. You can never give back what's been taken. He says he'll hunger for more power, and Xaden says he'd rather die than be one of him, but he already is. Xaden feels the power from the ground and he has a craving for it. And that's where we end. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any requests for books that I review and summarize, just leave a comment and I will do my best.